The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
We're pleased today to interview a very special person here in Litchfield. Her name is Alice Elizabeth Morrill Dickenson. And Alice is going to tell us about her growing up here in Litchfield. So I'll ask her a few questions to prime the pump, and then we will hear her story. So, Alice, when were you born?
September 11th, 1919.
1919. All right. Right after World War II.
Right after World War One. Right after
World War One, yes. Where were you born?
At the Sacred Heart Hospital in Manchester.
Ah. Which has become...
It's part of CMC now.
Yes,
It is.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And your parents were?
My mother was Elizabeth Colby Morrill, and my father was Arthur Morrill.
And did they live here in Litchfield?
They weren't in Litchfield until after we were born, and I was born in Manchester, and my little sister was born in Manchester. And then we came to Litchfield in 1922. I was almost 3 years old.
All right. Where did you come to in Litchfield?
We came to the old Nahum Reed farm in the north end of Litchfield.
Do you know what's there now?
I don't know. I think it's still owned by the Colbys. I'm not sure. My uncles own it, I think.
Okay.
As far as I know.
All right. So, tell us about your family. You have sisters?
I had 3 younger sisters. Christine went to the University of New Hampshire, and she studied to be a dietitian. And just as soon as she got through college, she joined the Public Health Service, and she went off for 20 years to work for the government. Now she graduated in 1943, so that was the middle of World War II. And she went, and she never came back to New Hampshire, only for vacations. And my next sister, Ines Carolyn, studied at Hanover, at I forget the name of the school, but she studied to be a hospital technician. And she was always running around with some kind of a needle to stick in somebody. That was her game. And my youngest sister, Candace, studied in Boston. I forget the name of the hospital where she was, but she studied to be a nurse, and she was a registered nurse. So they all worked in hospitals but me. I worked with the 7th graders. They worked with the sick people. I worked with the lively ones.
You worked with the well and lively children, right. And your sister, Candace, lived here in Litchfield all of her life?
Yes, I think so. Yes, she did. She'd been here all her life.
And her daughter, Heidi, has been an art teacher for many years here in Litchfield.
Teacher, and her other daughter, Pamela, has been a teacher, too. Both of them. In fact, they're all teachers. My sister Ines had one daughter, Carolyn Jane, All three of the mothers worked in hospitals. All three of the daughters became school teachers. Now I don't know why, but they did.
Isn't that interesting? So, tell us what your growing up in the. Did you grow up in the Litchfield school system?
Yes. Oh yes. Hmm.
So tell us about what school you went to and what it was like.
There was only one school in Litchfield, and they had just built it and had a consolidated school. A few years before I started school. I think we started in 1925 in September. My cousin Anna and I were first graders. Let me see. We started in September 1925, and we had to ride on the trolley car. Everybody went to school on the trolley car. We had to walk a quarter of a mile down the road, down past Mrs. Blodgett's house, down past the Leach house where we met Ellen Leach, and she looked after us because she was a second grader, so she looked after Hannah and I. And then we waited down there. There was a crossing where the road crossed the trolley tracks, and we had to wait there, and we all got on the trolley together. And way down by the school, there was another crossing. They called it Parker's Crossing, right by the Parker farm. And we had to get off the trolley there and go into the school. It was a two-room school. It was cement and some kind of wood. And when I was in the 5th grade, I think, something happened in the middle of the night. The schoolhouse got on fire and the whole thing was gone by the next morning. But they rushed around and got books and they put us to school in the Grange Hall. We finished up the year in the Grange Hall. And by the next September, they had the school all rebuilt. And at this time, it was brick. So nothing has ever burned since then.
And the new brick school was Griffin?
Well, I think they call it Griffin. I'm not sure.
Right.
It was just the Litchfield Grammar School when we were there. Mhm.
Okay. All right. Can you remember any things that happened while you were in school in Litchfield?
Well, I know we put on an operetta once, and that was quite a chore, and we put on plays. When I was an 8th grader, we put on a play. We earned money for our graduation. And after we graduated, we went on a trip to the White Mountains. Our teacher, Mrs. Blodgett, and the teacher who taught in the elementary room, Miss Hutchinson then, and there were 10 of us kids, and 2 cars. We took food with us, and we camped out. We had a wonderful time. We went to the Lost River. We went to the Flume, several places in the White Mountains, which most of us had never seen before.
Very nice. So when you went to school, you said you went into 1st grade. How many grades were in your classroom?
There were 4 grades in each room. 4 grades in grade 1 to 4 and grades 5 to 8 in the other room. Mm-hmm.
2 teachers?
2 teachers. Mm-hmm. They didn't have enough students there. They told us they could have closed out one room during World War II. There were so few students that they could have closed out one of the rooms, but they decided they'd be better for the kids if they had 2 teachers in 2 rooms, so they kept it all.
Wow. So tell us about high school. Where'd you go for that?
Everybody in Litchfield went to high school somewhere else. In the old days, they used to go across country to Derry to go to Pinkerton Academy, and the very few people who went to high school went to Pinkerton, because Pinkerton was an old school, and it was a very good school. But we went to, the closest school for us was Central High School in Manchester. So we went to Central High, and all the students that lived in the south end of town went to school in Nashua, and then they started going to, after they built the school in Hudson, Alvern High School, they started going to the Alvern School. But we went to Manchester Central.
And how did you get there?
Well, sometimes we went with my uncle in the milk truck. sometimes. And if my father was home, he took us. We went however we could get there, and we came home in the afternoon. I forget. I think there was a bus part of the time. No, it was the old trolley car was still running. We used to come down to Goss Falls and walk the rest of the way home. Sometimes we had to walk all the way, several miles, but we didn't always have to. You know, we'd get a ride if somebody came along.
Oh, my. So there was no bus system for high schools.
No, there wasn't any when we were going to school.
Right.
No.
What kind of extracurricular activities did you do in high school?
We couldn't do very much because of transportation. I was in the chorus, and I was in 3 operettas, I think, when I was in high school. Let me see, what else? There was something else I did. I was in one more club, but my cousin Anna was an art student, and she took art, and she belonged to the art club. But that was as much as we could do. We couldn't do too much.
How many students would you say roughly there were from Litchfield at that time going to Central?
Let me see, there was Alice Reed was ahead of us, and Gertrude was with Anna and I. There were only about 5 or 6 of us going to Central. Maybe somewhere between 6 and 10.
Okay.
There weren't too many, you know.
All right, so what happened after you graduated from high school?
I was all signed up to go to Bates College, so I just went to Bates. Bates is in Lewiston, Maine. And that's where I wanted to go, so that's where I went.
How did you get there?
Well, my father had to take me up in September and leave me there.
No coming home on weekends.
I hardly ever. I only came home 1 or 2 weekends all the time I was in college. Well, I came home for the vacations and holidays, but very few weekends. Maybe 2 weekends all the 4 years I was in college. I didn't come home weekends. I had plenty of studying to do.
What was your major?
I majored in history and government. When I got through school, I taught English and math.
Okay. Life has its twists, right?
Well, it does. Well, I like the math very much. I think I'd rather teach math any day, but they always needed English teachers. They still need English teachers.
So you graduated from Bates. You don't remember what year that was?
I know, it was 1941. It's 70 years ago. It's a long time ago.
And what did you do after that? You graduated.
I went to see my superintendent that I knew when I was in Litchfield, and he had a job for me in Pelham, New Hampshire, in the 7th. Well, they had a 4-year high school there, 7th and 8th, 9th and 10th. And I had the English classes, and that's where I taught English and math. They had that strange combination of English and math, but I liked it. So I taught English and math there at Pelham for a couple of years.
And then where?
Then I went to Pinkerton in Derry, and I taught English at Pinkerton, English and prize speaking at Pinkerton.
All right. I thought you taught in Merrimack. Are we going to come to that?
Oh, I finally got there, yes.
Okay.
Let me see now. After Pinkerton, I taught in Raymond for 3 years, and then I came to Merrimack.
Okay.
And I think it was in Merrimack for, I don't know how many years, 36 years, I think, in Merrimack.
Oh, wow. At what school?
When I first came to Merrimack, they still had the old high school that they called McGaw Normal Institute. And in the old days, the people from Litchfield that went to high school, some of them used to go across the river to go to high school, and some of them used to stay over there used to board over there somewhere, and the very men who were the older men in town, Frank Conning and Isaac Center, both went to school at McGaw. And I heard the story once that Isaac Center had gone to McGaw for 2 or 3 years, maybe a couple of years, and his father had a letter from the principal that said, "Don't send Isaac back this year. I can't teach him anymore."
Okay.
And Mr. Conning told my father that when he was going to school, his mother would say some mornings, "Now, Frank, I want fish for supper, so you be sure to bring a fish home tonight." Well, he had a pitchfork down in the bushes somewhere, and he said he used to just put that pitchfork down in the water of the river, and he'd catch a fish every single time. No, there were that many fish in the river. Oh, I guess that's so. Frank Conning told it must have been so.
All right. I don't know if we have fish in the river now, but
Well, there were years when they wouldn't dare to eat any of them.
that's true. That's true, too. So why did Pat Jewett tell me you were her teacher for hockey or something? Where would she have had you?
Pinkerton. Oh, yes. Well, I'll tell you one thing. I was the youngest teacher on the faculty. So I took over a lot. I had to take over a lot of the athletic work, and they did have a hockey team, and they had a field hockey team and basketball team. Oh, they were crazy about sports at Pinkerton, and Pat was one of the crazy ones.
My mother went to Pinkerton, and she played basketball, and she got pneumonia. That's all I know. Oh, and I have a picture of her in her uniform. Yeah, yeah.
Well, she couldn't have been there too long before I got there. I was at Pinkerton, 42, 41, 42, 42, 43 to 44.
Okay.
It was in World War II. And the boys were leaving. The senior boys were just walking out the door every once in a while. Along in the springtime, they'd just be gone to the service. And we had a very good principal there. Ivor Hackler was a very, very good principal. A good man to work for. A good man to be running a school.
So, we haven't heard about your love life. You want to tell us about how you met your husband?
Well, he'd like to tell you because he used to laugh like anything. I was visiting my friend Alice Reed in Merrimack, and her husband was going down the street to see the fellas down there. And they were digging worms. They were going fishing, and they were digging those great big, I forget what they call those things, great big worms to go fishing. And Dick was down there too, so he went down, and that's say I met Dick, and Dick came back, and that's how I met him. They were digging worms to go fishing.
What a story.
It's a wild story.
It is. We hope it was about Dick and not about the worms.
Well, I was more interested in Dick. I didn't care about the worms.
We're glad to hear that.
Well, I didn't mind the worms. I could pick up the worms. Some girls couldn't even pick up a worm, but
Right. So, you and Dick lived in Merrimack? Is
Yes.
that correct?
Mhm, we did. Mhm.
Okay. For quite a few years.
I think it was 62 years.
Oh, my.
Hmm.
All right. He was from Merrimack?
No, he was from Richmond, New Hampshire, a little town
Oh, yes.
over in the corner of the state, right on the Massachusetts border. There's a little town of Orange, south, and several others. I can't name all of them.
Sure. Yeah.
And he's not too far from. I think if you go through Richmond, you go into Hinsdale, and then you come to the Connecticut River. It's over in that corner.
Right. I should have asked you before this, being the pastor of Litchfield Community Church, tell me about going to church when you were younger.
We came to Litchfield in 1922. And I think my folks, my mother and father and my Uncle Sterling Colby, joined the church in 1923. There was a big class that joined then, and I think we started going to Sunday school then. We had to go to Sunday school on the trolley car. And my mother always had a big pocketbook, and she always had some white stockings in the pocketbook because when we walked by, in those days, the road wasn't finished, and we used to get mud on our stockings. So she always made us put on clean stockings before we went into church.
That should have been interesting.
Well, it was, but we just had to have clean white socks. We couldn't have mud on our socks.
So did you have a Sunday school program or a youth program?
We had Sunday school all the time when we were little, and then when in 1936 the flood came down through Litchfield. The flood came down the river. And we had an elderly pastor, Reverend Earl Brooks. He was a Presbyterian minister, but he was a biology professor at Boston University. But his mother wanted one of her boys to be a minister, so he was the one that was chosen to be the minister. And he came up to Litchfield. He used to come up on the train, and somebody from the Campbell house used to go down and meet him. And sometimes he'd get on the trolley and come up to the back of the church on the trolley, and he'd be hunting around. Sometimes he'd come early, and he'd always be going out some back road to find some flowers somewhere. He knew every plant that grew in Litchfield, I think. I guess he knew every one that grew in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. He was very nice. He was here for 7 years, but when the flood came, he just got discouraged, and he didn't come back to preach. And they found a young fellow at Boston University Theological School, Harold Ewing, and Mr. Ewing was all full of pep and vim and vigor, and his wife was the same way. They had Sunday school, and in Sunday afternoon we had a young people's organization, and we had that going for all the years that Mr. Ewing was here. Well, he was here just for 2 years, and then when Mr. Ewing left, we had another fellow from Boston University, Harold. His name was Herald. He was born on Christmas Day, and his mother named him Harold. And he was a good singer. He was a wonderful singer. Harold Grandstaff was the next one. And then we had William Pritchard. He was the third young fellow that we had along the way. By that time, I was through college, and I don't remember who came next. But those are some of the fellows that we had.
Okay.
Yeah, and they all organized and had the young peoples going. Mm-hmm. We did. We had a very good young people's group.
So you mentioned that you are the longest. You've had the longest membership in the church of anybody alive now, right? So tell us about your membership, like when you became a member.
I think they were having a class go into the church, and my sister Christine and my cousins Anna and Gladys and several of the neighbor girls all joined at the same time, but my cousin Eleanor didn't know whether her father would let her join the Presbyterian church. Eleanor's father had been a Methodist minister, so Eleanor had to wait and get permission. So I waited with Eleanor. So all the others joined, and then Eleanor and I joined several months later. So that's why I was late. But I'm the oldest person. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. The oldest member.
I'm the oldest member. But
Okay.
some of them have been members longer than I have. My sister and two of my sisters have been members longer than I have.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were in the first
We
group.
were in that first group.
So you're just a few months
Just
apart.
a little bit later.
Right, right. Well, we are so privileged to have you back here in Litchfield this winter, and thank you for sharing your time with us. You have so many wonderful stories to tell about the past, and I just look on you as being a whole set of encyclopedias between your ears. So thank you for sharing some of your wisdom with us today.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.